Bank manager's racism humiliates black man, but what happens the next day shocks everyone. A man who wondered how long could he endure the humiliations imposed by a system that seemed to be against him. In a large American city where haste and ambition masked social tensions, James Carter, a 35-year-old black man, found himself trapped between his dreams and the cruel reality of racial discrimination. With a degree in business administration, James was a competent financial manager, but his skin color made him invisible in the eyes of those in power. He was on the brink of a career transition, seeking a loan that could transform his life and future. However, what should have been an opportunity would become yet another test of resilience. One morning, James entered a bank branch in the heart of New York City. The environment was impersonal, with glass tables reflecting the coldness of financial power. He headed to the office of Richard Bennett, a senior white manager who not only held a prestigious position, but also made a point of displaying his superiority. Richard, a 45-year-old man, believed that his success was the result of his own efforts, ignoring the privilege that his race afforded him. When he met James, he did not see a professional seeking help, but a nobody who did not deserve to occupy that space. With comments disguised as subtlety, Richard began to cast doubts on James's ability to manage a business. Each word was a stab, each cynical smile a denial of the dignity James sought. While maintaining an outward calm, the silent anger within him boiled. James left the bank with his head down, carrying the weight of humiliation, but also the seed of a growing desire for change. However, fate has unexpected ways of intertwining lives. The next day, in a high-level executive meeting, James entered the conference room again. Now he was no longer a client at Richard's mercy, but an investing partner backed by an anonymous investor who revealed himself to be the majority owner of the bank's shares. The impact was devastating for Richard, who saw the man he had belittled transform into his superior. James did not use his new position for revenge, but with dignity made Richard confront the depth of his arrogance and prejudice. James's story is a reflection on overcoming adversity and power. He, who had always had to endure oppression, found in his professional rise a form of resistance and dignity. Through his journey, he challenges the notions of success and status imposed by a society that often forgets the value of respect and empathy. James's quest for recognition is not just a struggle for his own dignity, but a powerful message about the importance of standing against injustices and transforming pain into strength. Now in a position of power, James Carter felt a mix of satisfaction and apprehension. The transformation of his status was a triumph, but he knew that the road ahead was filled with challenges. The corporate environment had not suddenly changed. The same culture that had belittled him still permeated the walls of the bank. He felt the glances, the whispered conversations, and the resistance from colleagues who were not well acquainted with the idea of a black man in a prominent position. Over time, James realized that his new position not only granted him power, but also an immense weight. He had to prove himself at every step, not only to his superiors, but also to himself. The doubts that had once been external now echoed within his mind. He began to question whether he was truly capable of leading. The pressure to succeed was intense, and every mistake felt like a reflection of his worth as a man and a professional. However, there were people around him who supported him. Sarah, a team colleague with whom he had worked on previous projects, became a close friend. She was a 30-year-old white woman with her own history of challenges. Sarah had always believed in James, admiring his work ethic and determination. She knew he faced a mountain of difficulties and was willing to help him scale each of those obstacles. Together, they began implementing changes at the bank, focusing on diversity and inclusion, seeking to create an environment where everyone could thrive. But not everyone was willing to accept this change. Richard, still recovering from the shock of seeing James in a leadership position, became an adversary. He felt threatened and began sabotaging projects in which James was involved. Richard used his influence to divert resources and undermine others' trust in James. This betrayal was not just an attack on James's career, but an attempt to dismantle his newly constructed identity. In one of those meetings, while trying to present a new inclusion proposal, James felt the tension in the air. Richard stood up, interrupting him with a sarcastic smile. "Do you really think this is going to work? With your limited experience, it's a shot in the dark." Richard's words cut like a knife. James felt the weight of distrust and hostility, and the anger began to bubble up again. But instead of snapping back, he took a deep breath and remembered the lessons he had learned throughout his journey. He knew that giving in to anger would get him nowhere. With Sarah's help, James began gathering data and testimonials that illustrated the importance of a diverse work environment. He decided that the best way to respond to Richard was with facts and results. Instead of allowing himself to be defeated, James dedicated himself to working harder and preparing better. He participated in workshops and seminars, not only to improve his skills, but also to better understand the challenges he faced as a black man in a leadership position. Meanwhile, his relationship with Sarah began to blossom. They became more than colleagues. They were allies. Together, they faced the resistance from other executives who also saw James as a threat. This friendship solidified amid challenges, but the pressure from work began to affect James's personal life. He distanced himself from friends and family, plunging into a world of stress and loneliness. The professional success he so desired was costing him his most important relationships. James began to question his deep beliefs. Was success really worth it if it meant sacrificing his mental health and friendships? Doubts about his ability to balance personal and professional life haunted him. He remembered his childhood, the dreams he had and the people who always supported him. With that, the pressure became unbearable. He realized that to truly succeed, he needed to take care of himself and those around him. At this crucial moment, James decided he needed a break. He stepped away from work for a few days and reflected on his priorities. What truly mattered? What did he really want to achieve? The answer was clear. He wanted to be a leader who not only succeeded, but also inspired others to fight for their dreams, regardless of their color or background. This new understanding gave James the strength to confront Richard and the other obstacles that would arise in his path, arming himself not only with knowledge, but with a renewed purpose. James was back at work, but the break he took didn't seem to be enough to calm his restless mind. The weight of responsibility still accompanied him, and hopes for a more inclusive future at the bank faced new challenges. Richard seemed to have intensified his sabotage tactics, now not only in meetings, but also through conversations on the company's social media and even among the most influential executives. James realized that Richard was not just fighting against change, but also trying to destabilize the trust his colleagues had in him. James's nights became longer. He found himself awake, tossing ideas around in his mind, questioning whether he was truly capable of making a difference. The pressure was affecting his physical health. He began to experience frequent headaches, and his eating habits became irregular. Friends started to notice his absence, and his family's concern grew. They tried to reach out, but James, lost in his thoughts, couldn't find the time or energy to reconnect. Sarah, on the other hand, was becoming increasingly aware of what was happening with James. She was concerned about his health and tried to convince him to talk about his feelings. One afternoon, during a break at work, she decided to be direct. "James, you don't have to face this alone. I'm here to help, but you need to open up to me." What's really going on? Sarah's words hit him hard. He knew he needed support, but it was difficult to let his guard down and admit his weaknesses. Fearing that this could be seen as a weakness, James hesitated. However, looking into Sarah's eyes, he realized that she genuinely cared. He decided to open up about his insecurities and fear of failure. To his surprise, sharing his struggles brought him a sense of relief. Sarah not only listened, but also shared her own experiences of failure and starting over. This conversation strengthened their friendship, and James realized he was not alone in this battle. Meanwhile, Richard continued to make his moves, trying to create a divide between James and the other team members. He began to spread rumors that James was only promoting changes to stand out, not for the good of the bank. This strategy started to generate distrust among some colleagues, and James felt the impact on his team. He realized he needed to act quickly to restore the trust that was fading. James decided to call a meeting with the entire team, where he could lay out his vision and reaffirm his commitment to diversity and inclusion. He worked hard on the presentation, gathering data and examples of companies that thrived by adopting inclusive policies. As he entered the conference room, he felt his heart race. The tension was palpable, and he knew many eyes were on him, some with expectation and others with skepticism. During the presentation, James felt strong and determined. He spoke passionately about the importance of a diverse work environment and how it could benefit the company as a whole. However, looking at Richard, who was sitting in a corner, he realized the battle was far from won. Richard interrupted again, throwing challenging questions and trying to divert attention from James. The tension rose, and James almost lost his focus, but remembering the support from Sarah and their conversation, he took a deep breath and responded calmly. He focused on the data, highlighting the benefits that could be achieved. James's response was well received by some team members, giving him the confidence he needed to continue. Despite the progress, James couldn't escape the reality that, in an unexpected twist, an important project that James had led began to fail. The data wasn't aligned as it should have been, and the team was confused. Richard seized the opportunity to oppose him, suggesting that James lacked the capability to lead projects of that magnitude. That was one of the hardest nights for James, who returned home feeling defeated. However, when he looked in the mirror, he remembered once again the importance of getting back up after each fall. The failure couldn't be the end of his journey. It had to be a lesson learned. He decided that instead of allowing himself to be downcast, he would investigate what went wrong and seek solutions. This newfound determination made him realize that true success wasn't just about victories, but also about how to face and learn from defeats. With the support of Sarah and other colleagues who began to join them, James started to reevaluate the project. They gathered, openly discussed the problems, and worked together to find solutions. This experience not only strengthened the team, but also showed James that true leadership was not just about being at the top, but about uniting people and guiding them through difficult times. In this process, the friendship between James and Sarah deepened even further. They became an unbeatable team, supporting each other through every challenge. However, as James moved forward on his journey, the shadow of Richard still loomed over him, promising that the battle was far from over. The emotional tension continued to grow as James prepared to face new challenges, determined not to let them bring him down again. While James dedicated himself to rebuilding his team and restoring his reputation, an unexpected event completely transformed the dynamics of the company. An anonymous email reached upper management, denouncing inappropriate practices and suggesting that Richard was manipulating information to destabilize James. The message contained enough evidence for an investigation to be opened, and it quickly spread through the bank's corridors, generating intense buzz among the employees. James felt torn between surprise and concern. On one hand, the revelation was a relief. Richard could finally be exposed for his treacherous tactics. On the other hand, he didn't want the battle to become personal, and the thought of seeing Richard in trouble troubled him. The pressure was once again on his shoulders, as the investigation could have serious consequences for everyone involved. Sarah, noticing James's anguish, encouraged him to stay focused on what really mattered. "You can't control what people do, James. What you can control is how you react to it. This could be an opportunity to show your strength and integrity," she said firmly. Her words resonated in his mind, but doubt still consumed him. He remembered his previous failures and how he had hesitated to act. This new situation was not just a chance for redemption, but also a test of his character. In the days that followed, the investigation took over the bank's atmosphere. Emergency meetings were called, and all employees began to question the veracity of the information circulating. James realized that the trust he had built with his team was once again at stake. He decided he needed to take a stand, not only as a leader, but as a person of principles who would never be swayed by the desire for revenge. One afternoon, while preparing for a meeting with upper management, James encountered an old friend, Marco, who worked in a different department. Marco had always been an advocate for ethics in business and had a history of courage in standing up for what was right. "James, don't let this consume you. Remember who you are and what you stand for. Your true victory lies in doing what is right, not in defeating Richard. Success is not just measured in achievements but also in integrity," Marco said, looking into James's eyes. These words echoed in his mind, and he began to rethink what it truly meant to be successful. For him, success should not be a mere competition, but a reflection of his values and the positive impact he wanted to have on the lives of those around him. He realized that by focusing on his insecurities and Richard's tactics, he had strayed from what truly mattered, building a work environment that valued inclusion and diversity. In the meeting with upper management, James decided to be transparent. He spoke openly about the difficulties he faced with Richard, but also emphasized the importance of learning and growing from experiences. He shared his visions for what could be done to improve the bank's culture and how everyone could benefit from working together. He committed to supporting the investigation, but urged the team to focus on the future rather than getting caught up in the negativity of the past. The response from management surprised James. Instead of focusing solely on Richard's actions, they recognized James's courage in facing the situation with ethics and integrity. The team began to rally around him, demonstrating that true strength lay in collaboration and mutual respect. Richard, on the other hand, began to lose support, and his influence within the company diminished. However, the battle was still not over. The investigation brought many painful truths to light, and James's team had to deal with the reality that not everyone was willing to change. Some colleagues still supported Richard, and that made James feel vulnerable. He had to confront not only Richard's sabotage tactics, but also his own insecurities about his ability to lead in such a divided environment. This experience made him reconsider his choices and priorities. James realized that his struggles were not just about winning an internal battle, but about creating a legacy of empathy and understanding. He began to understand that true success was the ability to inspire others to be better, to work together toward a common goal, even in the face of adversity. As James navigated this new phase, he felt stronger than ever. His connection with Sarah deepened, and together they began to foster an environment where everyone felt heard and valued. He knew that the journey was still full of challenges, but now more than ever, he was ready to face whatever came his way, determined to be an agent of change and an example of resilience and leadership. The ongoing investigation brought a wave of changes to James's life. He realized that after his decision to be transparent in the meeting with upper management, something had shifted within him. The courage to take a stand not only strengthened him but also united his team in a way he had never imagined. The conversations around the coffee machine shifted from gossip about Richard to discussions about how they could improve the bank's culture. However, even with this new energy, James faced challenges that would lead him to a new level of introspection. On a particularly difficult day, while reviewing documents in the meeting room, James felt the weight of the pressure. Marco's words still echoed in his mind, but the reality was that the battle was far from over. He looked out the window, watching the bustling city outside. The sunlight illuminated the buildings, but his mind was cloudy. How could he continue to be a good leader when there were people around him who still supported Richard and his manipulative tactics? This doubt consumed him. That afternoon, Sarah entered the room and noticed that something was off. "James, you seem distant. What's going on?" she asked with a genuinely concerned expression. He hesitated for a moment but decided to share his feelings. "I'm worried about the division within the team. Some people are still on Richard's side, and it makes me feel like I'm not doing enough," he confessed. Sarah listened attentively. "James, you can't control everyone's opinion. What you can do is be an example. Keep promoting a positive environment, and those who truly matter will notice." "Change takes time," she replied, offering her support. Her words brought some comfort, but the feeling of insecurity still haunted him. In the following days, James dedicated himself to implementing small changes. He started organizing group meetings where everyone could share their ideas and concerns. He wanted to create a safe space where every voice was heard. However, even with this initiative, James realized that there was still resistance. Some team members were skeptical and preferred to remain loyal to Richard, which left him frustrated. One morning during one of those meetings, a colleague named Alex began to question James's intentions. "Do you really think you can change the culture here? Richard is a strong figure and many of us still believe he is the best for the company," Alex said, crossing his arms. James felt his heart race. He took a deep breath, trying not to let anger and frustration overwhelm him. "I understand that change can be difficult, but I ask you to consider the possibility of a new path. I'm here to listen to you, and together we can build something better," he responded, trying to stay calm. After the meeting, James sat alone at his desk reflecting on the situation. He felt vulnerable yet determined. He knew he needed to find a way to regain his team's trust. He decided that, in addition to being open, he also needed to demonstrate that he genuinely cared about each of their well-being. In a conversation with Sarah, James expressed his frustrations. "Sometimes I feel like I'm fighting against a wall. How can I make them see that I'm on their side?" he wondered, seeking answers. Sarah, with her calm demeanor, suggested, "Perhaps you should invite them to an event outside the office. A time to get to know each other better, without the pressure of work. It could help build bonds." James thought it was an excellent idea, He began planning a team-building day where everyone could relax and have fun. The event was a success. The laughter and camaraderie that emerged created a lighter atmosphere. He realized that by seeing his colleagues as people, not just as co-workers, he was building a space where trust could flourish. However, the shadow of Richard still loomed over them. Even with the new bonds, James knew the struggle was far from over. During a break, he overheard a group of employees quietly discussing the possibility of Richard returning to active duty. The mention of his name made James's stomach churn. He remembered the treacherous maneuvers Richard had used before, and the thought of him potentially influencing the team again made him uneasy. That night, as James prepared for bed, his worries kept him awake. He wondered if he could truly be the change he wanted to see. In that moment of solitude, he decided he couldn't let fear take over. He committed to continue fighting, not just for himself, but for his team. With renewed purpose, James fell asleep, determined to face whatever lay ahead with courage and integrity, always remembering the lessons learned on his journey. James was at a point in his life where change was inevitable, both internally and externally. He had made the decision to be transparent with his team, and this had generated a wave of hope and transformation. However, this decision also brought to light challenges he had never imagined facing. As he tried to unite his team around a new work culture, he encountered resistance from some members who were still loyal to Richard, a colleague who used manipulative tactics to maintain control. The pressure that James felt was intense. He often wondered if he truly had what it took to lead. Insecurity consumed him, and even moments of success felt fleeting. He began to realize that the true struggle was not just against Richard, but also against his own doubts and fears. On a particularly difficult day, he sat at his desk and allowed himself to feel the vulnerability that accompanied him. It was at that moment that Sarah's idea of organizing an event outside the office emerged. As he planned the event, James began to accept that he didn't need to carry the weight of change alone. He decided to be more open to suggestions and listen to what his team had to say. This new approach not only relieved the pressure he felt, but also opened the door for others to engage in the transformation process. He began to trust himself more and accepted that asking for help was not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strength. The day of the event arrived, and the atmosphere was light. The laughter and camaraderie that emerged among team members created a welcoming environment. During the activities, James noticed that some of his previously skeptical colleagues began to open up. He realized that the barriers that had existed were starting to dissolve, and this brought him a sense of accomplishment. He was in fact making a difference, but the shadow of Richard still loomed over them. In informal conversations, James heard rumors about Richard's possible return. This made him uneasy, but instead of allowing fear to dominate his mind, he decided he needed to prepare for what was coming. He could not let the progress he had made crumble. James began to reflect on what it truly meant to be a leader. He realized that success was not just about the position he held or the power he wielded. True success lay in cultivating an environment where people felt valued and heard. This shift in perspective helped him focus on what really mattered, building relationships and fostering a positive work environment. With this new vision, James began to apply lessons he had learned throughout his journey. He committed to creating a safe space for his team to express their concerns and ideas. By doing so, he not only became a stronger leader, but also started to feel more confident in his abilities. The change in his attitude was palpable, and his team began to notice it. As he faced his fears and insecurities, James began to experience significant personal growth. He realized he was not alone in his struggle. By promoting openness and communication, he also allowed himself to be vulnerable and share his own insecurities. This helped strengthen the bonds with his team, creating an environment where everyone felt more united and willing to work together. James also recognized that the unlikely friendships that formed during this process helped him grow. The connections he forged with colleagues who were once mere acquaintances now became foundational in his journey. These connections not only supported him, but also inspired him to continue fighting for a more ethical and collaborative work culture. Over time, James transformed into a leader who not only faced challenges, but also inspired others to do the same. He learned that overcoming obstacles came not only from external victories, but also from internal growth. The lessons he learned along the way shaped his worldview and helped him become an example for his team. Richard's return, which seemed like a threatening shadow, ultimately became an opportunity for James to show everyone that true strength and leadership are rooted in integrity and the ability to rise after each fall. Thus, by facing his challenges, James not only grew as a leader, but also as a human being, ready to face any storm that lay ahead. James was prepared for what seemed like the greatest challenge of his journey thus far. The team was gathered in a spacious, well-lit room, with anticipation hanging in the air. He knew that Richard, who had unexpectedly returned, was ready to contest his leadership style and undermine the new culture that was forming. Richard's presence felt like a weight, a constant reminder of the manipulation and control that once dominated the work environment. On that day, Richard began to speak, using his persuasive and subtle tone. He praised James's initiatives but quickly turned the discourse, questioning the new leader's ability to keep the team united and focused. "Do you really think you can keep everyone here happy and motivated? People need structure, order. Without that, everything falls apart," Richard said, casting meaningful glances at some team members who still admired him. The tension in the room escalated. James felt a knot in his stomach but took a deep breath. He could not let fear dominate him again. Recalling his recent reflections on leadership, he decided it was time to act with firmness and clarity. He stood up and, with a steady voice, responded, "Richard, structure is important, but it is not everything. What really matters is how we treat each other. We need an environment where everyone feels valued and heard." James realized that by speaking, he was not only defending his vision, but also opening up to the team. He continued that he had also made mistakes, experienced moments of doubt and insecurity, but he learned that true strength comes from acknowledging our flaws and working together to overcome them. Looking into the eyes of his colleagues, he saw some nodding in agreement. He was establishing a genuine connection. Richard, noticing that his speech was not having the desired effect, tried to divert attention. "This is all very nice, but results speak louder. And we need results," he insisted, trying to destabilize James. James did not let himself be shaken. He remembered the conversations he had with his team, the event that brought everyone together, and the friendships that blossomed. He knew that trust and collaboration were more valuable than any immediate result. Results are not just numbers on a spreadsheet. They are happy and motivated people who make the work happen. When each of us feels part of something bigger, we can achieve so much more. At that moment, one of his colleagues, Anna, stood up. "James is right. We feel the difference since he started listening to us and valuing our opinions. Richard, your approach may have worked in the past, but it is no longer what we want." Upon hearing this, other team members began to speak up, supporting James and expressing their desire for real change. Richard, now cornered, tried to regain control, but James's resistance and the newfound unity of the team were undeniable. With each word, James felt his confidence grow. He realized that he had overcome not only Richard, but also his own insecurities. He was standing there, and that was a victory. The conversation intensified, but now it was a healthy discussion where everyone was involved. James facilitated the dialogue, listening to each person's concerns and reaffirming the importance of Coley. He saw in real time how the team was coming together, how the bonds that had formed were stronger than any manipulative tactic Richard could use. When Richard finally fell silent, the tension that had once dominated the room dissipated. James looked around and saw encouraged faces, smiles of support. He understood that by facing his biggest challenge, he was not alone. Each team member had become part of his journey. The conversation ended with a consensus on the importance of a collaborative and healthy environment. James felt emotional, not only for having faced Richard, but for having managed to unite his team around a greater purpose. At the end of the day, as he walked home, James reflected on everything he had learned. He realized that true leadership does not come from position, but from the ability to inspire and connect with people. He had transformed his failures into valuable lessons and found strength in his vulnerability. The friendship and support he cultivated along the way were crucial for his transformation. James knew there were still challenges ahead, but with his team by his side, he was ready to face them. The journey of renewal was just beginning, and he was determined to continue building an environment where everyone could thrive. James walked back home, his heart still racing with the adrenaline from the meet. He had faced Richard and come out victorious, not just for defending his vision, but for managing to unite his team in a critical moment. The feeling of triumph was sweet, but also accompanied by a deep sense of responsibility. He knew that what had happened in the meeting room was just the beginning of a new phase in his leadership. In the following days, the team began to behave differently. There was a new energy in the air, a sense of renewal. The team members, once hesitant, now felt comfortable sharing their ideas and concerns. The trust that James had tried to cultivate was beginning to blossom. He remembered Anna's words during the meeting when she said that change was already happening. "James is right," she had said. "We feel the difference since he started listening to us." These words echoed in James's mind, a reminder of the impact he could have. In one of the following meetings, James made a point of creating space for each team member to speak. He wanted everyone to feel part of the process, to have a voice. What followed was a flow of ideas and suggestions. People were excited, and James realized that his approach was paying off. He saw illuminated faces, and that filled him with joy. The team was coming together, and now they were truly collaborating. However, not everything was easy. Richard was still around, and his presence continued to be a reminder of the past. James knew he would need to handle this wisely. In an informal meeting with the team, he decided to address the situation directly. "I want everyone to know that while Richard was an important figure in the past, we are building something new here. Our voices matter, and that is what counts," he said, looking into the eyes of each one. "If anyone has concerns or doubts, please come to me. We are in this together." The team members agreed, and James felt a weight lift from his shoulders. He realized that transparency was key. Open dialogue became a regular practice, and the conversations that had once been tense were now filled with respect and understanding. James was feeling more confident and secure in his position, but he also knew that true leadership required humility and a willingness to learn. That week, James ran into Anna at the company cafe. They talked about how things had changed. Anna smiled and said she really thought it would take longer for the team to come together. "But you made it happen quickly. Your courage inspired all of us." James smiled, feeling grateful for her support. "It was a joint effort. I couldn't have done it without you all," he replied, reflecting on the power of collaboration. As days turned into weeks, James realized he had learned a lot about himself. His experience with Richard had taught him the importance of standing firm, but also the need to be vulnerable. He remembered his moments of insecurity, how he had hesitated in his leadership. Now he understood that these experiences didn't make him weak. On the contrary, they made him more human and approachable. The impact of his new approach began to spread to other teams within the company. Other leaders started to notice the change in atmosphere and asked James how he had managed to unite his team. In informal conversations, he shared his experiences, emphasizing the importance of listening to and valuing people. He wanted others to know that true leadership was not about control, but about empathy. Over time, James's team achieved impressive results. They not only met their goals, but also created an environment where creativity and innovation thrived. James realized he had accomplished more than just results. He had built a home for each of them. Looking back, James felt proud of his journey. He had faced a challenge that seemed insurmountable, but instead of being defeated, he found strength in his team. He knew he would still face difficulties, but now he had the confidence that together they could overcome any obstacle. The true transformation had begun, and he was determined to continue on this new path, where every voice mattered and every idea was valued. James looked at his team, now united and vibrant, and felt a mix of emotion and gratitude. He remembered the time when uncertainty and fear dominated the meeting room, when Richard, with his authoritarian style, made it difficult to effect any change. But now, the transformation was in full bloom. What once seemed like an insurmountable challenge had become an opportunity for growth and personal overcoming. James realized that he had not only won a battle against Richard, but also gained the trust of his team. As the months passed, accomplishments piled up. The team not only met their goals, but exceeded expectations, generating innovative ideas that left everyone surprised. James felt fulfilled. He had learned that true leadership was not about imposing his vision, but about listening to and valuing each team member. This new approach had created an environment where everyone felt safe to express their opinions and collaborate. It was a triumph not only professionally but personally. However, James knew that the shadow of Richard still loomed over the company. He didn't want the former boss to feel ignored, but he also knew he couldn't allow his leadership style to dominate again. So at a company social event, James decided to take action. He organized a presentation where everyone could share their achievements and learnings. Richard would be one of the guests. When Richard arrived, the tension was palpable. But instead of feeling intimidated, James chose to use the opportunity to showcase how much his team had grown. He began the presentation with a slide showing the results achieved, followed by testimonials from each team member. "This is what happens when we listen to each other," James said, looking firmly at Richard. "When we value our voices." The message was clear. The era of authoritarianism had come to an end. Richard, surprised and isolated, realized that his tactics would no longer have a place. He tried to interrupt the presentation, but James, with a calm smile, continued. By the end, the room was filled with applause and smiles. James felt he had done more than simply defeat Richard. He had shown everyone and himself that true strength came from unity and mutual respect. Looking at his team, he saw radiant faces, full of pride. James recognized that he had transformed throughout this journey. He was no longer just a leader, he was a facilitator, a friend. The friendship and collaboration he had cultivated brought a deep sense of purpose and fulfillment. James's final message was clear and strong. Each of us has the power to make a difference. Don't be afraid to stand up and be heard. He knew that his journey was not over, but he was ready to face whatever came next, always with his team by his side. Now, he felt it was time to invite everyone to reflect on their own experiences. "Share your stories of overcoming and transformation in the comments," he said, with a sparkle in his eyes. "Let's build a community where everyone can feel inspired to act and make a difference." Like and subscribe for more stories like this, because together we can grow even more. Change begins with each of us. With that, James knew his journey had a greater purpose. He had risen again, and, in doing so, had created a path for others to do the same. The true victory was not just in defeating Richard, but in creating a space where every voice mattered and every idea was valued. He had found not only leadership, but the true essence of being part of a team. We have reached the end of this touching story. If you liked it and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. Right now, there's a playlist of videos on your screen. If you want to keep watching these heartfelt stories, just click on it and you'll start watching. And now, tell us in the comments which city you are watching from and leave your like to support our work. Now, a sincere question. Do you agree with what happened in the story? We want to know your opinion. Until the next video.